Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Happy, I don't even know. I need to give Winston heartworm medicine. It's June 15th. It's the
We can
middle
give it
of
to
the
him
month.
later.
Yeah. I'm like, what's today? Yeah. Tomorrow, or this week, is the 1-year anniversary of Harry Potter Wizards Unite. So I just made a video because we got a task for the Brilliant event. And it's going to be crazy, hopefully.
Yeah, it sounds like it'll be pretty fun for sure. Hopefully we get some good story. As we know here at Magical Theory, we're big fans of the story.
We are big fans of the story. I'm making progress also on Harry Potter Hogwarts Mystery. Because remember yesterday I was like, oh my gosh, is that a student?
Yeah, you were gasping and stuff a lot.
But it wasn't as intense as previous story pieces were. But we're still in year 6. For me, I'm in year 6, and some major things happen in year 6 if you haven't gotten there yet.
Major things.
But that means that there's only one more year at Hogwarts, so something has to happen.
Maybe you'll fail and have to get held back.
Yeah, maybe I'll just quit school.
Harry style.
Yeah.
What else is going on? I mean, that's a lot. That's probably enough.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just rolling out some cool emojis, the Discord.
Yeah. The underground.
And then this, which we've put off for a little bit. We've been thinking about it.
Yeah.
I looked at a lot of stuff, but let's just kind of dive into it when you're ready. Okay. Once ready. So you can pull out your book. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
Oh, yeah.
We don't necessarily have any type of title or synopsis. We're just going to talk about the book as a whole. I played around with should we title it the Chambers of Secrets? Chambers of Secret or something like that, where you play with the sort of plural here. And I was thinking, we had talked a little bit, and the theme that I came up with was basically, let's explore the idea of each individual character or some of these characters as being themselves a chamber of secrets, right? The whole idea of a person maintaining secrets within themselves, right? And I think it's incredibly relevant, and I'd like to go through a bunch of characters with you and have a sense of the different ways in which secrets are kept and for different reasons and things like that. But I think to start with, I'll just monologue for a second about Harry in particular, right? I think that we are meant to understand this story and Harry's evolution through it as a struggle within himself, very internal, right?
Yeah.
The first book is much more external, right? He finds out basically only good things about himself. He already knew his parents died, but he thought he was a pariah and finds out he's a wizard. He thought he was alone, finds out he has friends and can make friends. He was, abused, and now he's loved in many ways. He's learning probably, for the first time. But in this book, it's dark. It's dark right away, right? When we find out, for example, that another one of our characters, someone who seems somewhat minor but weird, Dobby, the beginning of the book is keeping secrets from Harry, right?
I thought you were talking about Ginny when you said someone really minor but weird.
Ginny's irrelevant, yeah.
No, yeah, Dobby.
She's awesome. Yeah, and just it sets the stage, I think, for this book to be secrets. It's interesting to me that our first episode of Magical Theory was about secrets.
Yes.
In the first book.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's why I thought that it was very intriguing when you mentioned to me that you wanted to talk about this idea of secrets, Chamber of Secrets, because I do think that from the first book, we talked a lot about lots of things that came up again in book 2, but book 2 had a different lens to it. And it's very much in your face of things are secret. So we have this magical world, but things are secretive, and individual people are very mysterious indeed. So Dobby as one of the first people that we meet, that's kind of what is happening here?
Yeah.
What's your deal?
Yeah, the first book, if you think about it, a lot of the plot is about the secret of the Philosopher's Stone, that it even exists and that it's in Hogwarts, and they have to figure it out. It's a mystery, and most of the Harry Potter series is framed as mystery. So I think it's not surprising that there are secrets, but they're not really internal to Harry. The only time maybe with the mirror where he's kind of struggling with like what is precious to him. But this is much different. I mean, in the first book, it doesn't seem like he really is troubled too much. Not too much that the hat tried to put him in Slytherin. Right? He just kind of is like very defiant.
That he's haunted by it. It's something that he hasn't, or that's been lingering in the back of his mind. That, and part of it might be because like a year in Hogwarts interacting with other Slytherin students, being like, man, I'm glad I'm not in Slytherin. Look at these fools over here, Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle. Like, they are hot messes over here, you know?
Yeah.
And so that, like, all he had, literally the only information he had was like, there's not a dark wizard who wasn't in Slytherin, or whatever the phrasing of it was. That's all he had. He had no context whatsoever, just kind of like, oh, well, these people are immersed in the wizarding world. This is something that maybe has credibility. And then going off of that framing, if that is your baseline, then your future interactions with Slytherin students, perhaps maybe he had some pleasant interactions, but that doesn't fit, that doesn't reinscribe that idea of, evil.
Not to mention that even right before the sorting, Harry does a sorting of his own, right? Because Malfoy poses to him like, I'll help you tell the good wizards from the bad. And he's like, I can do that for myself. And then he has this confirmation of Slytherin as a bad place because that's where Malfoy goes. So I think it becomes something that, like, because he hasn't spoken it out loud for a year, and then these events start happening that have to do with the heir of Slytherin, it's very quick for him to slip in his own mind to start thinking like maybe he has something to do with it. He doesn't ask the right people about the fact, or even tell the right people that he can hear voices, or that he even heard voices in his approach. Why is he always at the scene of these crimes? There's a legitimate reason. But the more and more that it happens, the more and more that he has to deny that like there was any reason for him to be there, the more suspicious people get of him. But there actually was a reason. Yeah. He could hear it. Right.
So last book, I mean, Harry was like this in the last book as well. He had it out for Snape, perhaps because Snape is head of house for Slytherin, and also the way Snape acts kind of, again, reinforces this...
A man with some secrets.
Yeah, and this caricature of, like... I was backing up. So the point I'm going to make is that these secrets kind of really in this book complexify our characters a bit. I mean, we did see glimpses of complexity in book 1, but even more so in book 2. There's like a lot. You're like, wow, these are humans with, and we know that Harry has baggage, but like all of these other characters become more prominent in like they are people, and it's really messy. So that's why single stories or stereotyping or these like broad categorizations of people is very dangerous, because if that's like how you're operating and you're continuing to think that, so you have Snape, Harry also didn't like Malfoy that much, but like didn't have a reason to accuse him of anything. And then this book, there's lots of things happening, and part of it with the Malfoys that like paint this picture of who that family is the revelation that Dobby is their house elf. And so there's like I don't know, it's just this very weird dynamic that's created, and a lot of this stems from Harry confronting this whole thing, and that's why it was so important in like the last scene with Dumbledore talking to Harry, making Harry talk through himself of like this whole thing, like with the sorting hat and blah, 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 whatever. And then, of course, Dumbledore's like, well, the sword of Gryffindor wouldn't have presented itself to you and all this stuff, which is okay, but still doesn't really disrupt much the whole Slytherin is not that great, or you don't belong there because of all the flaws that we're gonna basically highlight all the flaws of Slytherin, even though every single house, every single individual person has flaws. But the weird like competition and battling that is rooted in historical conflict. Salazar Slytherin, Godric Gryffindor, like the founders. proves to you that there's this long history and also a long legacy of secrets that continue to get passed down and warped over time.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
So I have two directions that I'd like to go. I'll pose it to you what you want to think about. I wanted to think about the way that if we are all chambers of secrets, the ways that we betray that, right? That even by the nature of keeping a secret, we tend to act in a way that makes it to me potentially obvious that we have a secret. Like we act in weird ways. So like Ginny acts weird and Percy acts weird and Dobby acts weird and Harry acts a little weird. Mm-hmm. And like Dumbledore can see through Tom Riddle and Harry. And like the way that they speak. Now you can argue it's like the magic of legilimency and like he can just see it or something like that. But I think it's more than that. It's body language. It's that our actions don't make sense in light of our words because we're keeping some kind of secret. And then I think the other side of that is that actually sometimes like, although it can be easy to tell that somebody is telling it has a secret or multiple secrets, we can also be conned, right? So like it is if you assume that they don't have any secrets, then you can rationalize a lot of the behavior away. So I think like this happens a little bit to other people as we start now to dig into Tom Riddle's backstory, like with the exception of Dumbledore, it seems, and Hagrid, of course, it seems like Tom Riddle was able to deflect essentially any suspicion away from himself, right? Because he cons people. Mm-hmm. So I think it's either of those two topics are really relevant to the story. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Well, there's I forgot that we were also going to talk about Lockhart. So when you were listing out characters earlier to me today, I literally forgot about Lockhart because you were like, right. Lockhart, and I was like, oh yeah, that guy.
Well, he's the epitome of this, both sides of it, right?
Yeah.
That's why I find him so fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, because it's weird also, like how people have different positionalities. And so like I've said this before with Lockhart, like I think that, I mean, it's so weird. It's weird to me that he has a fan club and that people are just like fawning over him. Like I don't like that element of the story because I think it's stupid, or like, you know, that sort of like you're blindly following this guy that like to other people are kind of like, he's clearly a fraud. Like, why are you falling for this stuff? And so like, it's a really tough spot to be between because like, to some extent, like you don't necessarily have to have someone as like extreme as Lockhart. You can have people who are, you know, charming, Tom Riddle or whatever, to be in that where you have not necessarily a fan
Lockhart
club,
has
but kind of
a certain type of charisma. I do think that charisma is often the a definition of charisma could be like the methods by which you can con people into thinking one thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's the truth or not.
Yeah, it's messy or dangerous also to like think that it's just messy all around. Like, because some people can have charisma but not necessarily be wanting to con you, but
cruel with it. Yeah.
The thing is, like, you can't tell.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
well, I think in this book it's particularly interesting because I think there is a version of this book in which there isn't any sort of omniscient narrator or like Harry's inner monologue or having Ron state things where like you don't actually get a suspicion that Lockhart is full of it, right? There's a way to write it. If you wrote this book from Hermione's perspective or Molly Weasley's perspective, like how is it that they can internalize the fact that no, like he must be telling the truth. Like look at how like upfront he is and like he's so brave and the way he speaks and like he's boisterous and it makes it seem so real and like it must be real. Who would lie about something like this?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that's why it's so messy because like I would love to give people the benefit of the doubt, but like also as a human and being a flawed human, like I've had certain interactions over and over where I'm like, yeah, if I meet someone that gives me a reminder of that, like I'm going to latch on to that. So I'm going to go back actually to talking about book one. Harry, when he meets Malfoy, like the way that she writes it is that he kind of there's this connection to Dudley. And so that sort of like, if you have like some sort of sensitivity and you're like, okay, because that, I mean, we do this all the time. We kind of like categorize people, and like we're working off of our framings and our past experiences, and like the more experiences you have, perhaps like the more those like little category boxes aren't so rigid, where you're like, hey, we're gonna put this person here and they have no chance of like being anything other than that. And that's like what's messy about like Harry's own story about being like the great Harry Potter, that he's like, what do I do with this? I don't know.
Right. And
so I think part of like Harry's Chamber of Secrets is his he doesn't really vocalize a lot of his insecurities, which, I mean, we see them a little bit more in this book of like his thoughts, is particularly.
But he doesn't even vocalize it to Ron and Hermione, really.
No. And he has to be like Dumbledore's pulling teeth for him to even say anything like out loud about this. It's a very, it's almost kind of like suppressed, which is kind of like, no, we need to like process this, Harry, so that you can get through whatever it is.
Well, and because Harry, like, in some very real sense, until the kind of the end, he can convince himself a little bit that he is in fact the heir of Slytherin, right? That like all these bad things are happening because he is there. Mm-hmm. I think if he would have vocalized it would have lost a lot of power, but because he wasn't vocalizing it, he's kind of able to create these little like illusions for himself of being like, well, okay, I didn't actually release anything, but maybe it was my presence. Maybe it was that I could hear it that like was freeing it or something like that. Like it's kind of tricky because I think if he was able to be like, well, okay, let me think for a second about why I can hear something. Like once Hermione figures it out, it's like, oh, you can hear it because it's a snake. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, maybe I wasn't controlling it at all. It was just speaking and I could hear it or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Lockhart is the epitome of this. I think the other side of a similar discussion is Dobby, right? Who like, he embodies to me the idea that you betray secrets all the time, right? I mean, like, even if you are held under like the strictest of laws that we could imagine, which is like some magical rigid law, he still manages to betray the secret in some ways. I mean, even at the end, it's like a completely explicit betrayal. Like he like points to the diary and points to Malfoy and like, it's just vocal. So it's like this interesting thing with secrets of like, is it just the vocalizing of a secret that gives it away? Like we know plenty of times that like you could ask somebody a question, they like roll their eyes or like blush or give away the secret. And like, yeah, and then like, yeah. So Dobby is an interesting like metaphorical representation of secret keeping, what it actually looks like.
Yeah, what's interesting about Dobby, so it's so I'm thinking about the concept of secret, and so like when I was like I rambled a little bit to you earlier. It's kind of weird, but like I don't know, what is a secret? Like, what counts as a secret? Does it have to be like something that is intentionally suppressed, like you're aware of it? Or because there's a difference between like holding on to a secret and like people are full of secrets because you don't know everything about them, sort of thing. And so like I'm thinking about Dobby specifically, like I highly doubt that Lucius Malfoy is like, Dobby, I'm telling you this in confidence, don't tell any secrets, right? So it's like there's secrets, there's trust, there's sort of like I'm criticizing Harry for like not vocalizing things that he's suppressing inside of him. However, like there is this, once you like let people in on your secret, whatever it is, there is this like power thing as well of like you can't really control whether or not it gets out. Yeah. There's like this element of trust.
So I think what you're getting at is that there is a very fine and nebulous distinction between secrecy and privacy, right? That you like, and in past episodes, like I've been pretty against keeping secrets, which makes it seem like I'm like totally in favor of full transparency, right? That people should just walk around like fully transparent about all aspects of their lives. But there is clearly a trade-off to such behavior, and I'd never go into those absolute types of positions.
Yeah.
Because
never.
That's right. I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no way for me to communicate that more accurately, unfortunately. So, but I think it's like really telling, like, that is the pushback.
Yeah.
And it's because, okay, so like there's two main counter arguments, I think, to like why you would want, so if I'm saying like you shouldn't keep secrets, what maybe the more explicit statement that I want to do is like you shouldn't tell lies. So there's a fine distinction there, but I think there's counterpoints where it's like, well, you should be able to own particular things about yourself and not have to publicize them. Like they can be yours and yours alone. There seems to be value in that type of position. And then I think also like pain, right? Like well, maybe that's where it gets more dicey for me, is like lying or keeping secrets or otherwise doing things in order to spare somebody pain is dicey for me. That's a dicey position. So that's sort of where I start to, walk back and forth in these things.
Yeah. And I don't think there's an easy, like, absolute, not necessarily an absolute, but like even if we try to refine it or qualify it with these things, like, okay, well, not telling the truth to spare someone's feelings, like under what circumstances and who is it, and like what is the historical background between the parties involved and all this stuff. Because I've said this, I don't know when I said this before, but from a very like cynical and not any faith in humanity sort of perspective that sometimes I have, is one of the reasons why I think people might, myself included, might not share things or want some sort of privacy or not walk around like with my whole self out all the time, is because of a potential that could be weaponized and used against me. And this is like sorry for anyone who's like into psychology. I find psychology fascinating, but like sometimes I just get very concerned about how certain knowledge or understanding of humans can be used in manipulative ways. And that's something that I'm super sensitive to. So like, for example, if we're taking the diary, Tom Riddle's diary, and Ginny is like pouring her little heart and soul into this, and how that is directly used to manipulate her. I mean, part of it is like you're trying to establish some sort of trust and do all this stuff, and you have this vulnerable girl who is willing to be open and is totally not seeing that this thing is going to harm her, but in the moment she probably feels some sort of relief of being able to talk to someone and be like, can't talk to my brothers about this because they're going to tease me endlessly. I don't know who her friends are really, or if we see like scenes with her with other people, but it's also kind of, you're in your first year, like you're making new friends, you're trying to establish yourself. I mean, I can't imagine like first year at Hogwarts, you're trying to like establish yourself or navigate it and figure out like, where do I belong here? And like, you don't want that. Not only is it like she's like goofy, has a crush, but it's on Harry frickin' Potter, like the chosen one. Like I can't imagine like just how painful that whole experience was for her, and to like come out on the other side of it and just be like, whoa. What is that? What did I just go through?
I think you're completely right. And I think you've nailed it in terms of what the diary can represent here, which is that the diary could, in terms of this metaphor, so obviously there's a lot of stuff going on, but the diary can represent like the danger of sharing your secrets, that if you expose yourself psychologically, it will be weaponized against you. It's not a question of if it will be weaponized against you by people. And then I think that the next step, and you've already gotten there before I did in this conversation, is like trust, right? That when you choose to share your secrets, there are different outcomes. And like one of the reasons why you don't, and I'm speaking like about the general you, share all of your secrets at once is because it's an exchange. Trust is built in this way, right? You share a little bit of yourself, you expose a little bit of your inner self, and then a little more, and then a little more. And as long as you haven't been betrayed, you get you release more and more, and the trust is built. Now, as the diary kind of represents, well, with trust, right, comes a bigger betrayal. More trust, more betrayal. So like the longer that this person can put up a con, the more they can weaponize and abuse you with it. But it's always the fine distinction of human relationships, right? So set aside the diary for a second, is like, yeah, so there is a risk to it, but there is also a reward to it, in the sense of like you become something else once you can vocalize certain things.
Yeah. Like
it frees you. It can free you quite well.
Yeah, no, I agree, because I think that so one of the things that I distinctly remember, and you probably remember as well, when in grad school and like working with professors, people commenting on like how my former advisor would say like, oh, Lynette is not tactful or whatever. Like you just say what you say and mean what you, or whatever. And to me at the time, it just seemed so obvious to me. Like, why wouldn't I do that? Like, what is the point if you're not like saying what you're really saying at the expense of like keeping it nice or keeping it pleasant or not rocking the boat or whatever.
But I think yes, I'm completely there. And I think it should be put into what the environment of such that, like what it's supposed to be if you're exploring things in PhD, what the world kind of talks about PhD is like, doing this sort of free thinking and being able to make something new. Now it's not that necessarily, but that's how it's spoken about. And part of the reason that it's not that is because people are too tactful, right?
Yeah.
That they don't speak the raw truths that maybe they should be speaking.
Yeah.
And you can see why, because when people do, they get attacked.
Yeah.
Right? It's weaponized against them. So it's a sneaky and tricky dilemma that plays out a lot in graduate school, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And just in general.
Yeah, right. I mean, we've talked endlessly about social media and like polishing, and like I mean, I'm not a sociologist or anything like that, but I feel like to me, as someone who grew up with the internet and didn't have social media really, we've talked about this before, like we were on AIM, we were like on messaging and stuff like that. We weren't on like, we didn't grow up with Instagram, right? So to have that become a thing that's created and see it evolve over time, like from a person who, like, I would say we have digital literacies in terms of like these platforms and how people use them, and I think that people can see it, but it's very, we're at this very polished state where everything is like, so take YouTube for example. Like YouTube is all like production quality now. Like that's the thing. And there's no way that YouTube could have stayed at early YouTube stage forever, because that's not part of like how things evolve. Well, yeah, you're right. Things evolve, and like the more that we collectively learn how to leverage particular tools or use them over and over again, like the more polished or the more like familiar that we'll see those things come into play in terms of like how they become like these larger institutions or whatever. And so I feel like social media for me is it's really, I find myself more reserved on social media than I used to, and in my digital interactions. You
know what happened, in my opinion, and maybe one way to interpret the evolution of these things is it went from like AIM and early Facebook, it was literally your friends. So what you did on those spaces was interact with friends. So what I put out on Facebook or what I said on AIM or my away messages or whatever it might be was as if I was sitting with my friends most of the time. But when social media became something other than that, you started to add somebody as a friend who wasn't actually your friend. Now it's followers. Now it's
Yes.
totally different.
Everything.
The relationship has fundamentally changed. You don't have, or you didn't build the relationship before social media. It happened simultaneously or even after. And I think part of what has happened is that people realize that. And so it's fundamentally totally different.
Right.
So now there are only two real ways, as far as I can tell, to get strangers not to attack you. You either try to be perfect or you perfectly expose like a secret. So like you can be praised because you've produced something amazing, and you can also be praised because you produce something revelatory, right? So it's like, I've had this amazing epiphany, and now I feel this way about, LGBTQ rights or whatever it might be, or Black Lives Matter, whatever.
Yeah.
So I've had this revelation. Here's my post. It goes viral.
Yep.
Or like I have been perfectly tailored and presenting this fake persona, and it will go viral given enough time, like for some people, right? That you can be an Instagram model or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And I think just a little bit, a microcosm of this is the idea of the unpopular opinion subreddit is quite fascinating, right? It's this place where people generally under anonymous Reddit profiles post a truly unpopular opinion, which is interesting because that is almost synonymous with just a nuanced opinion or a developing opinion. It's like people are trying to play out the ideas, and that's what makes it unpopular. So we've talked so much about like you get this frozen sense of people because or very few people, and I think it's increasing as we learn more, because we start to see through the sort of ridiculous transparency of like the perfection, and actually like it is a form of lie, and then that the lie is that you've figured it all out and you have nothing else to hide. So like it's just starting to me to like the seas are shifting a little bit where people are like, hey, can you help me with this? Like I don't understand this, in public spaces. So I mean I could go on forever about social media, but I think it's relevant to the book.
Yeah, I mean, I personally have, I don't know, I find it really boring. I find the polish and the perfection very boring, and because it's the same stuff over and over, and it makes me not want to participate, quite frankly.
Stop.
Because everything, no, it's still going.
Oh, okay. Sorry. It wasn't counting anymore, so
Okay.
apparently it's just rounding. But yeah.
I don't know. It's exhausting. It's exhausting to be someone who thinks that I have to embody something. It's exhausting to be in a system, because when you talked about followers, that's what it's called. You have followers. It's exhausting to be like, oh, you have a platform, no matter how big, or you should be a role model, or this, that, and whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, I was about to cuss right there. I just want to just be myself and do whatever. Like I don't know. It's kind of.
And now we've hit what you were bringing up before, which is like, but there's a trust level. So like there's this dangerous balance on YouTube, especially because like if you reveal a little more of yourself, you might actually become way more popular, but that popularity that you gain, they haven't earned any of your trust. You don't know that they're not going to attack you.
Yeah.
Right. So like I think right now you have this nice sort of state, or you have for a little while, where like the people who show up for you have developed a relationship in general, and the new people joining like see the relationship and understand it, right? quickly because it's like well established and people are kind to each other and we're thoughtful and we're having fun and we're talking goofy theories and things like that. But I think like you can see some of the pathology in people who skyrocket in popularity, like maybe the Paul brothers or whoever, where it's like, like they don't know what to do because everything that they produce, like there's a cynical way of looking at it of like, well, they're just rabble rousers. So they're like, they'll just say and do whatever because like they're just trying to get more clicks, get more views. There's an uncynical way of being like, they have no idea what to do. They can't expose like their inner secrets because the reality of their community is that that a bunch of them will attack anything that they make. So like, why put out the truth? Then you're being attacked for who you actually are. Possibly they already did, but like, let's just play the thought experiment out of like, maybe there are people out there who have this popularity who feel like, well, I might as well keep lying because people will attack me for the lies. I'm not going to tell them the truth about myself and get attacked for who I actually am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole
it's
thing,
dark.
the
It's
whole
dark.
thing
It's
is
dark.
effed, okay?
It's dark.
So like
it's forensic.
It's the F foundable because like it's I don't know. I could also talk endlessly about YouTube and
you want to go back to the book for a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, what else is there to talk about? I guess maybe a couple of other secret keepers who we've danced with but haven't talked much about, which are going to be Tom Riddle and Dumbledore.
The big ones.
A quote that really stuck out to me this read through was when Dumbledore was saying to McGonagall, like, it's not a question of who, it's a question of how, but he doesn't explain himself. Like, he's not like, no, it's clearly Voldemort, it's none of our students. Like, I know exactly who is opening this.
Yeah.
Because it's when Harry's I think Harry overhears him when he's in the hospital wing. That's when that conversation happens.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's many things. So, like, Harry not telling Ron and Hermione, like, what he thinks about, like, the whole snake situation or, like, thinking he's the heir Slytherin or whatever. And then we have this Dumbledore thing, which I just can't understand. This happened, what did this happen? Was it Hermione? Something happened. I don't remember if it was book 1 or book 2 where Hermione doesn't tell. Oh no, it was me in a previous episode criticizing Hermione for like Lockhart, her like obsession with Lockhart. And if she actually did have any doubts, like she could have vocalized that to him. And you said to me, well, maybe they'll make fun of her. And it's like, yeah, I didn't consider that. But like Dumbledore, I'm sorry, no excuse for me. Like McGonagall, Professor McGonagall, of people that you have entrusted with like secrets or anything, who is also brilliant or who can help you or whatever. Like, it makes no sense to me. Like, what do you gain from, like, silently, like, trying to figure this out on your own? Or, like, that's the thing that drives me crazy. Like, you have brilliant people. Don't try to be, like, the hero or be the one that's trying to figure it out at the end.
Yeah,
like,
and this is not the last time that he will do this, right? Like, he is a secret keeper. And eventually, he literally is the secret keeper in the Order of the Phoenix, like, and beyond. So there's this... He gets that title, and it's well earned, right? Because it is part of his biggest flaw is that he keeps secrets, and he justifies it. But in my opinion, it's because he thinks very low of other wizards, and he also enjoys being enigmatic.
Yeah. Like, you want credit for this. You want to be the person that, like, I can't stand that. Like, that's the whole thing that I find it very, sure, I will give it to you. You are brilliant. But, like, that doesn't mean that you couldn't be more brilliant and without working with other people.
A little bit of truth telling.
Stop being a secret holder.
Right.
Like, don't try to go for glory. It makes me so angry.
It does.
Because, like, in real life, like, that stuff makes me angry as well. Like, come on. It's not that, you're not that special. Like, general people of the world, including myself, you're so much better. Humans are so much better when they're working with each other.
That's right.
Like, I'm gonna stand by that
relationship
as an
sure.
absolute for my.
It's not even additive. It's much better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Dumbledore, man. Oof. He is the character for me. It's just I have the most complicated relationship with Dumbledore. I don't.
Yeah.
At times I just absolutely love him, and at times I'm so exasperated by him. And it's like, man, what are you? You're standing with teachers in a hospital wing. A student has just been attacked, and you are gonna be cryptic?
Yep.
Come on, guy, get out of here. Get out of town.
Yeah.
And I think the argument is that he plays a long game.
Mm-hmm.
Plays a long game. He doesn't show his hand. He's in this. It's like he plays this role in this story of Kingmaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a 4D chess game, and him and Tom Riddle are playing against each other, and everyone else is just a bunch of pawns.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever type of piece that isn't the king, right? And so it's this, you can argue that like the outcome is good.
Yeah.
When all is said and done. But that's not an argument that says that there were no other good outcomes or even better outcomes that could have happened with a little bit of openness. Because then when it comes around in the 5th book, when he will be a pariah for the wizarding, Dumbledore will be a pariah. Well, it's like, hey man, maybe if you told people a little bit more about Tom Riddle and Voldemort earlier on, they would have believed you, right? That is, we'll get to it, I guess, but it's just occurring to me in the moment of exactly that there's groundwork on both sides of this. Yes, Voldemort is a good liar and a good secret keeper of his own side, but he is often aided, maybe unwittingly, by Dumbledore not talking about it. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to the Horcruxes, like I think that J.K. Rowling resolves this and says like, well, Dumbledore had to do this because if he had said like, hey everyone, Daily Prophet article, like look around for magical objects, like Voldemort made them into Horcruxes, like it's that would somehow be problematic, and Voldemort would just move them all, and it would make it much harder to actually get them. But we're getting beyond ourselves. But I think that's kind of the point of doing this podcast as explicitly a reread or like a re-engagement with the story. And I know we have some new engagers with the story, and that's great. Mm-hmm. So you'll hopefully make sense of what we're saying later. But I think there's something there. I mean, Dumbledore, man. I love Dumbledore and I hate Dumbledore. He is just so annoying sometimes. It's like, man, say what you mean.
Well, yeah, because it comes off condescending, pretentious to me. Like, you're not that special, dude. You are, but you're not really. Call in Coach McGonagall.
That's the best part in book 7 of getting Aberforth finally. I mean, like, he's such the counterpunch. It's like, no, he's always been this way. Mm-hmm. He's hurt so many people. Mm-hmm. He will always be this way. Mm-hmm. He is a manipulator. He is using you. It doesn't mean he's not using you to good ends. And I am, in fact, a supporter of the ends. And ultimately, Aberforth is. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that Aberforth agrees with the means at all.
Yeah.
And he has good reason, of course. But of course, it's gray. I mean, that's what makes it interesting. It's like you I personally could take the complete opposite stance and be like, well, Dumbledore had literally no choice. If he did things differently, like this is the end of Infinity War, end game, like 1 out of a billion or whatever.
Yeah.
But we'll never know.
No, we won't. Because he's dead. Oh.
What else is going on?
Oh my gosh.
Any other secret stuff we should talk about?
Secrets. I mean, I don't know. It's clearly a complicated topic because there's not really, I mean, as most things are for like being a human, there's not really an answer of like, what is the best way to do this, to be a human, to keep, or what kinds of secrets should be kept, under which circumstances should you share secrets, under which circumstances should you expose secrets that are, that's like
not
a different
yours,
tone that are like
to begin with, right?
Dobby, for example, like
that's right.
So, or
there's some, yes,
that's why I think anything like that.
J.K. Rowling pointed us to what the book what the book summary should be about. Secrets, right? There's some. It's a theme for the book. It's a theme for all the books, but this one is really clear because of how much the internal struggle for Harry is about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. We talked about Ginny. We talked a little bit about Percy. I was thinking about Fred and George and how much of a relief and foil they often present because they are pretty open, but then later we do find like quite a bit of depth of character to both of them, that like their openness isn't, it's not a front, but it's not clearly not their entirety of how they think and feel about things. We talked a little bit about Ron. I think Hermione as well, like with Lockhart, but in general, like Hermione strikes often, as is often in these books for me, like the most delicate and precise balance of how she acts and treats people. She is blunt when she needs to be. She's sophisticated when she needs to be. Yes, she makes some mistakes, but she will remedy them eventually. That seems to be her MO, and it makes her, in my opinion, like the most clear hero. I think Harry as well, as we go through the books, like his moral compass seems to, it wavers a little bit, but he struggles. It is the struggle that makes Harry interesting and compelling as a moral guide, because we get to sense his moral struggle of being like, oh my gosh, like what if it's me, you know? And it is exactly that type of struggle that I think is the most interesting, and where I tend to go with these types of discussions is like, well, there are no hard and fast rules, and because there are no hard and fast rules to when you should keep secrets or be transparent or be private or keep other people's secrets or expose them or whatever, like you need to go case by case. It's a constant consideration. You know, how honest should I be in this precise moment? Why wouldn't I be, and why should I be? And I think like it's dicey. I tend to, on principle, try to start from the truth, but I don't always tell it either. So it's at least not the whole truth. Yeah. Pathologies are bad. Pathologies are very bad. Pathological truth-telling isn't exactly great. Pathological lying is pretty bad too. So it's somewhere in between is a good place to be. And to be even thoughtful about being in between is maybe even better.
We haven't even talked about what truth means.
Yeah, we never will.
Other hour episode. Hour plus.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
You happy with that?
I'm good.
All right. Well, we'll start Prisoner of Azkaban next week.
Get your Prisoner of Azkaban.
We'll have to find it, maybe a new intro song. Oh boy. Yeah, the event starts tomorrow, and then there's also the weekend event is next weekend.
The Wizarding weekend.
That makes sense. Doesn't overlap with the Brilliant.
No.
Right.
Does not.
Well, good. Hopefully we see a lot of people there.
Yep.
Until next time, Juan's ready.